This is the PlantAmnesty slideshow on what we do and how we do it. It's by me, Cass Turnbull, the founder of PlantAmnesty, a nonprofit organization to promote better pruning. Or, as we like to say, to end the senseless torture and mutilation of trees and shrubs caused by malpruning. The name made me laugh. That's why I chose it. But it also says what we do and how we do it, which is to say, we are a mock militant organization that's trying to keep plants from being molested by human beings. And by malpruning, I mean topping of trees and sometimes the tipping of trees, inappropriate shearing of shrubs, sometimes that's okay and sometimes it's not, and the over-thinning of trees or shrubs. All these things are as common as dirt, or as we like to say, soil. The first thing that we crusade against is tree topping. It's as common in this day and age as bloodletting was back in George Washington's day. This is what I mean by tree topping. This one we call, I'm not buying it. Tree topping was extremely common in the Seattle area when I started PlantAmnesty 24 years ago. About 1990, I realized we needed to record our success and see if we were making any sort of progress whatsoever. In the 1990 Yellow Pages, the advertisements that listed topping as a service amounted to 61% of the display ads. By 2001, that number had dropped to 23%, and by 2011, that had dropped to 0% listing topping as a service. I want you to know it was so bad in Seattle that if you were a big tree, you were topped or you were about to be topped. It was such a large and intractable problem that when I told people I was going to end tree topping, they didn't think I was crazy. They knew I was crazy. It was a sort of problem like drunk driving was originally just considered that's too bad, but that's the way it is, or smoking in public places, in the workplace and in restaurants. People thought, oh, that's too bad, that annoys you, but it's never going to change. And these things can change, and I'm going to tell you how. But first, I want to go over the other forms of malpruning that we crusade against. That would be tipping or heading. Looks like this on a tree. Inappropriate shearing. Inappropriate shearing. Well, sometimes shearing's okay. That would be like with hedges or topiary. But 99% of what you see out there in commercial landscapes and a lot of home landscapes is just sort of horticultural self-abuse. It's shearing shrubs into meaningless shapes, usually balls and boxes, but sometimes nose cones or coffee cups. Board grounds crews get into this a lot. This is a landscape of sheared shrubs. This is actually my local bank, and I can get all my shots there. I've tried to talk to them, but you know how intractable it is. And this is an inappropriately sheared tree. I know because trees do not grow this tidy. And this will be the response to shearing. Whether it's a tree or a shrub, you'll get a billion of these water sprouts that grow back out. The other third form of malpruning is over-thinning. Thinning is more the right way to prune, but you can go overboard by doing too much. And I'm briefly going to go over these so you know what I'm talking about. General over-thinning, over-skirting, that's taking off too many of the lower limbs of a tree or shrub, or lion's tailing. This is an over-skirted set of broadleaf evergreens, happens to be rhododendrons and pieris, could be something different where you live, but it sort of looks like ostrich legs walking through the landscape. And who needs to see more of the wall? It's kind of silly. Here it is again. These plants were dressed to the ground, but for some reason the landscaper decided to skirt them all up and make them look quite leggy indeed. This is an over-thinned cherry tree. This is how it will soon look. Those plants that can water sprout do water sprout, and it's a maintenance nightmare. This is over-skirting on a conifer. We call it an Innis ardent palm tree. And here too many of the lower limbs have been taken off. This is an unsafe condition. This is an over-thinned deodar cedar, and it's been put on a starvation diet. This is what I mean by lion's tailing. That's when all the internal limbs are stripped out, leaving just sort of a puff of clouds at the end of each branch. And even though this is attractive, it's also not good pruning. The definition of good pruning is pruning that maintains or improves the long-term, that's not the short-term, but the long-term health, and in the case of trees, safety of plants. If anything you're doing now is going to cause more trouble later, then that is mal-pruning, not good pruning. But back to PlantAmnesty. Our first job is to alert the public to the crimes against nature being committed in their own backyards. The topic of pruning is just so dull that most people never break out of the cycle because they have no concept that there's even a problem. And with a name like PlantAmnesty, we don't have to try very hard. Reporters are thinking that maybe we are a plants' rights group, and all they have to do is call us up and have a really good human interest story. But how will we get the word out to the general public? One of the things we do is we staff an educational booth at the local flower and garden show and maybe at the home show, and we feature some of our worst mutilated trees and shrubs. Notice our little tree that says murdered by homeowner. Gives people kind of a chuckle, but then they come up and start asking pruning questions. So this is a way to garner interest in the subject of pruning, whereas if you just talk about proper pruning, people just move right on to the next booth. Also, we hold an ugly yard photo contest every year, which makes people laugh, but it also gives them kind of a low-grade fear that they're going to show up on the evening news if they don't learn how to prune correctly. And in fact, we use the 3 great human motivators to get people to prune correctly. The first one is fear. That would be fear of public embarrassment. 2, greed. That means that people get more money for pruning the right way. Those are for people in the business. And 3, guilt. Guilt for having hurt plants. Here's the Ugly Yard Photo Contest. As it is occurring, we do award prizes to the various categories: bad pruning trees, bad pruning shrubs, deadly dull, too bizarre, and bad design. You can win valuable prizes. But the main thing we do is we get bad pruning in the news. Like I said, with a name like PlantAmnesty, we don't have to try very hard. The media just is hoping that we are a plants' rights group and maybe we're going to tell people they can't eat carrots or something. So they come to gobble up a yummy story, and they stay to ask a few pruning questions for the trees in their backyards. And even though they do stories on PlantAmnesty, or moi, the word gets out, and believe me, people really respect what they see on TV, hear on the radio, or read in the newspaper. TV is good. People will believe what they see on TV. They won't believe you. They won't believe their gardener. They won't believe their parent. They won't believe their spouse. I call this the spousal effect. The closer you are to the person giving you advice, the less likely they are to pay attention to it. But a complete stranger on the TV or in the news says the same thing, and it's like the word of God. Some years it's kind of slow in the media front, but then some opportunity will present itself. These were 8 horribly topped trees. They were cut in half on the parking strip in Seattle, and I got a bunch of calls from people that said, you have to do something, you have to do something. So we called a tree protest, and this is what it looked like. We had a 1-hour tree protest. The police showed up, and it made it in the evening news and on the evening TV and in the newspaper, and it was all very exciting, if somewhat scary. Here's another one where an entire avenue in Seattle has pretty much all mutilated trees and shrubs, and there doesn't seem to be any control of that sort of pruning. So we called another emergency tree protest and had the same results. The shop owners weren't too pleased, but the cops were really quite understanding and got kind of a kick out of it. PlantAmnesty doesn't do a lot of these. I think we've only done 4 or 5 in the 25 years, but we get a lot of notoriety for it.